there, comic friends. I'm Travis, and it's time for our edition of What the Fugue, where I talk about what's going on with me in my world of comics. How's it going, everybody? Let's see. Right off the bat, comics. This is going to be an awesome week of comics, or was an awesome week, depending on when you get your books. I'm not sure when I'm going to get my books. Looking at the tracking, normally I get my books on Friday. They didn't get shipped on Wednesday like they normally would. So, cross my fingers crossed, I get them on Saturday. I can read like a crazy person, at least have some of them read for a comic book roundtable on Saturday. You know, and if I don't get them, I don't know what we're going to do. Anyway, we'll be around in some sense in another comic book roundtable. Speaking of comic book shows, tomorrow night, or I don't know when you're watching this, but at any rate, on Friday, there is going to be a comic book show, Comic Book Fanatics, I believe is what the channel is called. An all-lady group is going to be reviewing Valiant's comic Faith. I neglected to pick up the book. I'm hoping I can go to the chain store and they'll have a copy there that I can hurry up and read Friday afternoon before the show. Their show is around 6:30 Pacific time on Friday. Give that a check. This will be their second show they've done together. First show was awesome, just kind of get a general idea of who they are, what they're about, and that sort of thing. So it was some good fun. So we'll see the shows going forward. All about supporting other comic book shows that are out there. Let's see what else. Of course, last week on Comic Book Roundtable, we talked a little about the DC's rebirth and the renumbering and what else, and I'm not going to get too excited about a lot of it because we just kind of don't know what's really going to be there. I'm hearing more and more. My biggest concern was, you know, they're going to shrink the comics as far as the breadth of scope of the DC universe and focus on just, you know, the kind of media franchise stuff, the movies and television shows and whatnot. So I was worried that was going to that's all we were going to have, and that's I'm hearing less and less that's not necessarily going to be the case. They're just going to make sure that they always have something in production that has to do with that if there's a show, they want to make sure they have a comic book in place. And they're starting to do that with the digital first stuff that they're hurrying up, like with Supergirl and whatnot. But they're going to make sure whatever movies are coming out that they have stuff in place. And they're recommitting to their comics first, the rest of the stuff second. I don't know that I believe that part, but I do hopefully believe that they're willing to tell their own stories instead of it just being a reflection of the TV shows or the movies or whatever. So, not going to get too concerned about that until we actually start seeing stuff that actually comes out. The other thing around that was, of course, the discussion on the number ones, you know, and how does that work, and, you know, renumbering our runs just keeping shorter or whatever. And, you know, I was thinking more about that, and I'm following more along the lines of number ones might be a good thing in the sense that it gives people the opportunity to get in on the book, because most people avoid books with long runs on them because there's not a jumping on point. And quite frankly, those of us who've been reading comics for a long time, when a comic says on the cover, you know, great jumping on point, how often is it really a good jumping on point versus how successful do they start a new story out when it starts at number one? Do the writers and storytellers usually do a decent job of when it's number one, kind of giving us a way to introduce the story? And so going back and doing a number one every so often of a book to allow people to get in on it, it might be a good thing to help draw in more viewers for the books, especially you know, a lot of these books that have large history and stuff. Now, and I think that we're going to see more and more of that, especially with the corporate comics as they're working to generate a larger dollar increase in their books and stuff. Whereas the independent books, not that they don't want to make a living doing what they do. Clearly, the more money they can make, the better. But I think that I think this is going to be one of the differences between independent books versus the corporate books. Is the independent books, you might get these longer runs. The big thing is do people get bored with something after a while? Do you start reading a comic book and when it gets about 30 issues in, if there isn't some fundamental change, some radical change in it, do we quit reading it? I know there's those, those of us, like with the corporate comics, you're loyal to a character and you just buy the comic because it has that character in it. And you bitch and complain when the bad stories are going, but you keep getting it because it's your character, and then you hope for the best that at some point somebody better comes along and does it, and you can celebrate it then. Do we do that with our independent comics, or do we get off of them after a while? We get bored because it hasn't changed, because it's the same creators working on the book. I don't know. For me, that actually appeals to me. I like the long form, storytelling and stuff. But I can see, like, we're a book like Revival. It's maybe not real easy to get in the middle of the book. You're missing so much by not knowing what happened before that, because it's all an important part of it. Whereas, like with Spider-Man, he has these adventures, and you have a base idea of Spider-Man, and once you have that base understanding of Spider-Man, you can read lots of Spider-Man stories here or there and have a sense of what's going on, kind of a thing. I don't know. I don't know. I'm seeing more pros to that number one thing. But I will lament the long runs that aren't there anymore. And like I said, maybe they'll just start doing them more like seasons. I know some of the independent books are doing that on. I think I've talked about this before, the fact like with The Life After, for instance, the book by Oni Press. Wonderful book. I really, really enjoy it a lot. It started out as The Life After. It went so many issues, a couple trades, I believe, and now it's called Exodus, The Life After. So, and it started out with a new number one. They gave a new chapter title to it, kind of a thing. And I hope they keep going that way. It's a smart way to do it because it creates a number one, gives people this sense of, well, I can get in here now, maybe into this. And I start reading it, then I go back and collect those other chapters, down the road. So, I just think it's a different way of telling and selling the story, right? It's kind of like, it feels like we're, now we all talk about them writing for the trades, and back in the day, you didn't need to have number ones for new chapters and whatnot. You could have the, Spider-Mans and Batmans and Supermans go on for a long time because there were a lot more kind of one and done or 2-issue stories, and that was it. And what happened in those lots of times was never referenced really ever again. It didn't really matter. Spider-Man could fight some, mutant two-headed nuclear waste boy in issue, 147, and then it never mattered again how he dealt with him and what happened to that character, unless suddenly that was some sort of end up being some sort of villain that people thought was popular, and then the villain may come back to fight again. But rarely did it actually go back and reference, something that happened 20, 30 issues ago. If it did, it had more to do with the current writer being kind of a fanboy and dipping into that old stuff. It just didn't. It didn't matter. They were reoccurring people, reoccurring villains, and you get that sense out of them. But whatever story happened before, wasn't referenced again. The villain wasn't talking about how they got beat or whatever. There weren't those kinds of things. I mean, it didn't dip into it quite so much. And things are way more serialized now, way more you kind of need to know what's going on the whole time. I mean, that's just a different way of the story. I think it's I think in a lot of ways, I think it is a maturing of comic books, a maturing of the comic book story, for better or for worse. Because we all, like I said, I think a lot of us lament to the fact that it would be nice to be able to just read one and done kind of stories. But one and done stories kind of are simple. I mean, not that they are impactful, because there clearly are single stories that are very impactful. There's lots of writers out there that have written single issue stories that are just have a lot of power to them and whatnot. But there's something to be said for that kind of serialized, long-term investment, in what's going on. It's just like if you're a TV watcher and you've watched a series for 2 or 3 seasons, you get invested in the small little things about the characters as much as whatever the thing they're doing. Because lots of those shows, have something that is kind of attaches all the shows together, but like they'll be, fixed all at one, in the single show kind of a thing. And so there's, more of that. I mean, I don't know. Like I said, there are times I like the one and done thing. I wish corporate comics were a lot more of that kind of, shorter, singular interest kind of thing. What felt more like the traditional old school comics, without them being dumb though. That's the other side to them. I mean, I love the old comics when I was a kid and stuff for what they were, but in comparison to modern comics, in lots of ways there's some beautiful stuff about those comics, but in lots of other ways those comics are really dumb, or dumbed down, I guess I should say. And parts of me really, really like these, the injections, the trees, the revival, the Wicked and Divines, the sagas, those sorts of stories, these kind of long and enveloped and twisted kind of things that needs that length to tell these really long tales and whatnot. So anyway, I'm just yabbering now about my love of comics and all the different ways I think they're great. Let's see, I am almost done with Punk Rock Jesus. Quite honestly, can't believe that a little over halfway. Can't believe that I've taken this long to get on the book. I've always heard great things about it and whatnot. It's really interesting. So this is the trade, this is the softback and whatnot. And a couple things about it that I find really curious. One is the fact is the paper. The paper is newsprint. It's like the cheaper newsprint kind of stuff. It's not like it's not crisp. It's newsprint. It's the cheaper version of what like Marvel uses right now for some of their paper. So it's got more of that newsprint kind of thing. And with black and white, I think this would look so much better because it's just black and white art. Would have been so much better if it was on crisp white paper. So my question is, if anybody out there has this in singles, what kind of paper was it? What kind of paper did Vertigo use? I mean, is this what it is? If you've got the hardback version of this, and I know some of you do, what's the paper like in it? Is it newsprint? Because I think that's kind of a bummer. The other thing they have a problem with, of course, because it's a trade. I don't know if it's the notorious DC stuff, whatever. But I lose the middle page, and like this is a double page spread. And to be quite honest with you, there's 2 pages in here that are this way. That as I was reading it, I read this panel, and then I started down here, and I got confused because I didn't realize that this travels over this. Holding it back like this and looking at it in the camera, I could tell more so that it was that way. But up close it didn't, because you lose so much of it in the gutter that I thought that it was that they were separate pages. There's another one back here someplace that that was that way too. That really threw me off. I couldn't figure out what the hell I was reading, and it should have been a double page spread, and I didn't get that. I didn't get that it was a double page spread. That I was supposed to be reading across it. So it read out of order. It was really confusing until I got to the very bottom and I realized, oh damn, this is how this is supposed to be. It's supposed to be read. And where is that at? Yeah, I can't find it now. Doesn't really matter. I had the example in there. You saw it. You know what I'm talking about. Oh yeah, this is it. This is the page. This is the page. So you're reading the panels, right? You're up here at the top. And I didn't realize that this show went this way. So I started reading down here, got down here, and went, what the? Oh, that's all one. It's even harder with that one because the one giant panel's in the middle. But anyway, so that's kind of a bummer too. I'm really thinking I want to pick this up in singles. Really, really cool story so far. Like I said, I don't know how it ends. It's pretty diabolic in a lot of ways and whatnot, but really cool. Maybe I'll talk about it more. There's plenty of videos out there of other people talking about it. Scott Runs with Comics. I think did a big old hangout. If I remember correctly, I avoided it because they didn't want anything spoiled for me. they talked about it. I'm sure that's a pretty good listen to. So hunt that down. 6 months, almost a year ago, maybe at this point. But yeah, that's what's going on with me in comics right now. Getting ready to finish this up. I sure I'll have it finished here by the end of the week. Then I will get back into reading some BPRD, Hell on Earth. I got that, of course, in hardbacks. I only read that at home. This I pack around with me in my bag so I can read it when I'm on breaks and that sort of thing. I think the next trade I'm going to be reading, I think is Harrow County. Had the first trade of Harrow County. I think that's what I'm going to read next. I have some other stuff I really want to read, but like I said, it's big stuff and it's hard to pack around with me. I don't like packing around the big giant things. Books get hurt too easy and they're kind of a pain to lug around. So anyway, that's it for me for now. I'll hopefully see you on this weekend. Hopefully I have my books to talk about. If not, we'll create some sort of video magic, as it were. But anyway, if you got nothing else going on, check out the Comic Book Fanatic channel and check that out tomorrow, 6:30 Pacific time. Ladies will be talking about Faith. We'll check out that new comic book from Valiant, which sounds kind of cool. A little bit of an alternative superhero in a number of ways, in a body image and just kind of personality, I think. So hopefully Valiant does a good job with it, with that many people jumping onto it. But I'm really curious to hear what they have to say, whether I get the book or not. I'll be tuning in to check it out and see what's going on. Anyway, have a great one. See you on the weekend.